Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And today we are joined by two very special guests. One is a returning friend of the show, one is a new friend of the show. We're joined by Austin and Tori, who are both a part of the Third Impact anime podcast. Guys, how are y'all?
Doing well, man. Thank you for letting me come back to talk about more Japanese cartoons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. I'm super excited. I don't get to go attend other shows very much at all, so very fun to be a guest on someone else's.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. When he asked, about you coming on, I was like, no, definitely. The more the merrier, um, and we're doing a whole women in film theme all month long. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about, what I thought would make for a good episode. And when women in anime sort of crossed my mind, I knew exactly who to call to. And so when he told me that he wanted to bring on someone else, I was like, well, he knows what he's talking about. So absolutely.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind.
We gave a little background on Austin, I think the last time he was here. Tori, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship to anime?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I have been into anime probably like most people into anime since I was a kid. It started with Sailor Moon and Pokemon and kind of evolved into what it is now. And I tend to like very psychological, like horror type shows and film in general. So yeah, I think it's a great medium, and we get some very, very unique things in anime and animation, especially that you would never get in a regular, live action film. So yeah, that's just a great genre or a great medium that I love very much, and I'm happy to be here to talk about.
Yeah, no. What are some of your favorites, or what's something that you're currently watching?
Yeah, currently watching not much. I've kind of been on a little bit of a burnout, so definitely some things to watch. But as far as favorites go, probably Evangelion is my number one. Sailor Moon still has a very special place in my heart, and probably Paranoia Agent and Serial Experiments Lane. So bringing out the highbrow stuff.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned Paranoia Agent, because last time I was on here, we were talking about Tokyo Godfathers, which is another Satoshi Kon work, but Paranoia Agent is basically the polar opposite of his brain. Like it's definitely the there's no Christmas spirit in Paranoia Agent. We'll just put it that way.
Exactly right.
Well, like I mentioned, we're doing women in anime this week because, especially here in America, the directors that I feel like most people talk about, most people know of, that aren't deep into the genre, are men. It is people like Miyazaki and you might have some that know people like Satoshi Kon and that sort of thing. And so it definitely doesn't seem like something that on this side of things has as much awareness around the women that are currently working in or have worked in anime. And so Austin told me that you two sort of do panels on this kind of thing. And so if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a crash course, because we also love educating our listeners. And so would you mind giving us a little crash course on sort of the history of women in anime?
Sure, no problem. We'll try and condense the history of an entire industry down into just a few sentences. I don't want to ramble too long because I definitely have a tendency to do that. And as I go on, Tori, just like we do in our panels, feel free to stop me anytime because I will just keep going.
Sure.
And I'll pass the baton to you if there's something that I know you're specifically more versed in than me. So, I mean, Paul, you're absolutely right. that the large perception of just sort of anime creators in general, it's a little bit different when you're talking about manga, but the creators in anime that are the most popular here in the States are mostly men. You got people like Miyazaki, like Takahata, like Makoto Shinkai comes to mind as somebody more modern. Mamoru Hosoda, who just had a film come out, Bell, a couple months ago, are mostly men, and a lot of the people in the anime industry from like a leadership perspective are men, but there are definitely some women. I mean, women have always been part of the industry in one way or another. It's just that typically the industry is very hierarchical whenever it comes to the director's chair. So it's fairly infrequent that you see women in that position, and to a larger extent just like younger people in general. Like it's very, very, very uncommon for like there to be an anime director who's like under the age of 35, if not 40, because most of the time the way that you get to be a director in something is like you go through up the studio hierarchy, you kind of grow into it. So that's like a general overview of like, you know, the current state of it. And another big reason why there's not as many women is, of course, like Japan, like many countries, you know, there's always a historical bent towards a big patriarchal focus. So just women haven't been given the opportunity to lead for as long as men have. So there is sort of the echoes of that into the modern day. But a lot of the women there, but that is kind of changing, and I think two of the directors that we're going to be talking about today, I would say, are kind of trailblazers in their own way in the modern sense. So yeah, I mean that's the general overview, and that's kind of how we introduce the panel. If there's anything I missed out of that conversation, please fill it in, Tori.
No, not particularly. I was just going to say that thinking on it, it's such a stark difference compared to Western filmmaking, where it feels like, you know, there are a bunch of women and non-binary directors compared to what you see in Japanese animation. So it's kind of a stark contrast to me, at least.
So that was a great overview. So just out of curiosity, if you do happen to know, who was the first woman to direct like an anime feature film or show? Do you happen to know?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I feel like that's definitely something I should know. Well, I guess here's kind of an answer. It's like when you're talking about like anime for TV, there ends up being like a series director and then a bunch of like episode directors. And there have been plenty of women who have worked as episode directors throughout anime for many decades. But it is not often that they really sit in the primary like series director chair or the like film director chair, as it were, in that top position. But knowing like who the first would be, that would be really helpful to me. I would like to say it was somebody out of Studio Ghibli, but unfortunately, from a company perspective, Ghibli can be fairly conservative, I guess. Miyazaki is very much a curmudgeon who is maybe not the most forward-thinking type of guy. He's very set in his ways.
No, yeah. I saw that infamous clip where the people brought him like that animation that they had been working on, this like algorithm of like how to 3D animate things, and he was like, "This is the most soulless thing I've ever seen."
Yeah,
it's an abomination.
He's not afraid to speak his mind, and sometimes he's really on point, but other times he's like, "Grandpa, please go home. You're tired." Energy.
Retire for real this time, please.
Yes, please retire and mean it. But yeah, it's kind of one of the unfortunate things about Ghibli. I keep throwing them under the bus in this one, but no, I really do like Ghibli. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but they have pretty consistently relied on their specific talent pool over the years and haven't necessarily done a good job at raising up the next generation, whereas other projects like Studio Kara's Animator Expo that they did a few years was all about raising up new talents in the industry, and in a way that was headed by sort of an old timer in the industry, Hideaki Anno, the director of Evangelion, who's been around since but for like 40 years, and that project really did intend to get new blood into the industry in a way that I don't though in a way that I wish Ghibli would also do. So I don't know. That was a brief aside, but I think it's irrelevant to point out that attitude because I don't think it's unique to just Ghibli. I think a lot of the studios can be more on that, like, let's not take chances and kind of go with quote unquote what has been working. So that's why it can be a little bit stagnant from that perspective sometimes.
Okay, interesting. Would you like to give us a little background on the two directors that we are going to be talking about today?
Sure. I've been talking plenty, so Tori, do you want to talk about either one of them?
I will let you take it. I should a second to gather my thoughts, so please go right on ahead.
Okay. Which movie did you guys want to talk about first?
Yeah.
I guess we'll do it alphabetically, so we'll be starting with a silent voice.
Okay, so Silent Voice. So the director of A Silent Voice is Naoko Yamada, and she is has primarily worked for a studio called Kyoto Animation for the lion's share of her career, if not maybe all of her career. She started as a an in-between animator early on in like the late 90s, the early 2000s, and then she sort of grew into the company, which is a very, very small company, and it's also outside of the outside of the Hollywood system, if you were. It's like it's decentralized. It's outside of Tokyo, where most of the anime industry is. So they have a slightly different way of doing things, and they're sort of outside of that bubble. So their production model is a little bit different than what you would find in a studio there. So she was able to sort of rise through the ranks as a episode director on a bunch of different things, and showed a really unique style of framing and animation and color design that the higher ups there were very pleased with. And she eventually got series director roles, and then went on to direct her first TV series with K-On! In the mid 2000s, which is a show about girls doing music and drinking tea, and it's a very good show. Tori, do you want to talk about? Do you want to kind of continue from there on Yamada's career?
Yeah. You tend to bring the factual, and I tend to bring the emotional about it. But
that's what makes us good co-panelists.
No, she just is a fantastic, very talented director, and the big thing about her, I think she's very good at kind of girl power and the dynamics of what makes friendships and drama and interpersonal relationships amongst young women and women in general. I know there's an interview with her talking about K-On!, how she kind of like, am I remembering correctly, that she kind of wanted to just make a group of friends that she thought would be fun to hang out with?
Yeah,
And
in a sense,
kind of, yeah, that's kind of how we got the young ladies in K-On!. But I think that's, what draws me a lot to her works are just how she displays those interpersonal relationships and connections to her characters and the characters with each other. So.
Mm-hmm. And K-On! Was really successful in its genre, which at the time there was, I mean, it's still kind of the case today. There's like a whole subgenre of anime that is kind of cutesily referred to as cute girls doing cute things. And that's what the shows are from a superficial perspective. But K-On! In particular is one of those shows that kind of goes beyond just like the aesthetics of, cutesy antics, and really does seem to resonate with audiences in a real human way, other than just like anime characters goofing off, where it has like a cross audience appeal. Like it appeals to a lot of different, it appeals to both like anime fans and like regular like TV watchers and things like that. And it appeals to women specifically because I cannot deny that there are a lot of like female-led anime series that are really just made for men, or young boys or what have you. But K-On! is really kind of different in that regard, in the sense that it takes its female characters very seriously. And I think it's a good baseline for where Yamada would go eventually with stuff like Tamako Market and the movie for that, which won a whole lot of awards, and then sort of set the stage for her adaptation of A Silent Voice in 2016.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in, honestly. And so, without further ado, I guess we should jump into reviewing A Silent Voice. And as always, we have a clip, so take a listen.
あのさ、俺と西宮、友達になれるかな。
友達？何それウケる。いじめてたやつと友達？
今日から新しい仲間が増えるぞ。縄文時代は。
お前さ、もっとうまくやらねえとうざがられちゃうんじゃねえの。
So that was A Silent Voice, the movie, from 2016. As they said, it is directed by Naoko Yamada, and it is based on a manga of the same name. And the screenplay is by Reiko Yoshida, and it stars, depending on, I guess, technically, the version that you listen to, or the whether you're getting dubs or subs. Miyu Irino. We'll just go off of the original Japanese cast for the subtitled version. Saori Hayami, Ayo Yuki, Kensho Ono, Yuki Kaneko, and the premise is a young man is ostracized by his classmates after he bullies a deaf girl to the point where she moves away. Years later, he sets off on a path for redemption. So, Tori, if you don't mind being put on the spot, since you're new to the show, would you like to go ahead and start us off?
Yeah. Oh gosh, where to start?
Have you seen this? I'm assuming you've seen this before.
Oh yes. This is actually my third time, I believe, watching it, just to kind of refresh myself for the podcast. So I originally, I've seen both versions. I've seen the English and the Japanese. I think kind of depending on what you feel comfortable with, they both hold up really well. The cast, the performances are incredible. And in the English dub, you have the there went my thought. The actress who plays Shoko, which is our main character who is deaf, that actress is actually deaf herself. And I don't believe that is the same case in the Japanese dub. So that is a really stuck out to me when I first learned about that. But it is one of those films, I think, that we can sit down and watch and at some point all relate to, with the story of bullying and being bullied. And it gets you right in the heart. And it's a very, very emotional watch, for sure.
No, absolutely. Austin, what did you think of it?
Oh man, well, Tori and I first saw it in theaters back when it first came out in stateside in like 2017 or so. I think we watched the Japanese version back then, but it was a film coming out sort of in the shadow of Your Name, which was another big like event film for anime at the time in 2016-17, that time frame, because Your Name was so big. It was a huge film that it seemed like everyone and their mother went to go see. So another film like A Silent Voice coming out sort of in its shadow was no doubt going to be compared to it. So that was kind of the energy at the time. But I think nowadays in hindsight, I think maybe most people would maybe not compare them so much because they're very different films. Like Your Name is very much like it's like a big sort of feel-good movie that also tugs on your heartstrings a little bit, but A Silent Voice is very, very difficult to watch in parts, very not for everyone if you have a certain, history in your growing up where you might be sensitive to certain things, if you were bullied, or yeah, exactly. So it really, it's like, it can be like sandpaper for some people in one way or another, but ultimately very cathartic, I think. So in a way, I kind of appreciate A Silent Voice a little bit more for being so serious and yet also having this like undeniable twinge of like hopefulness and humanity to it. So I just think it's a really excellent film. I think most of my issues with it, small I, would be like in the fact that it is a 2-hour movie that adapts like a 6-volume manga series, which goes pretty in depth with a bunch of different characters that we only kind of get to see in the movie. So it makes me think, what would it be like if this was a TV series instead of just a single film? But then again, I don't know how much I really care about that because I think the final product ended up being really good anyway. So no, I really like it. All of that to say, I really like the movie. So it's a good movie. But yeah, since we've bound to we've what am I trying to say? Let me start over. Yeah, Tori and I, we've seen it, we've known about it for a long time, but you guys, how did you guys find this film, and what did you guys think of it? I'm more interested in what you guys, the more anime newbies, what you guys have to think about it.
Well, to answer where I found it, you had sent me an email like a month ago at this point, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less. Where you gave me like a list of a few different directors, and I was looking at it, and I was trying to come up with the content schedule for this month, and get some guests lined up, and get some things nailed down and stuff like that. And I really just needed to come up, with the movies kind of as quick as I could on the day that I was planning. It was kind of a busy day, and so I was.
Well, you guys make a lot of content, so I'm sure you have to schedule.
That was my idea.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
To be a lot more on the fly, and so I just was looking at the directors that you had listed, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna kind of off the cuff it, because you mentioned, you gave me little notes on all of them, and so like I just picked one that you had like specifically mentioned from each of them, or from the two that we were discussing, and so that's kind of how both of them got picked. It was a little bit at random. I didn't really read the plot synopsis of them before we started watching them.
So were you like taken off guard?
You picked two doozies to go with. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you really did. Well done.
I know how to pick them. So off of that, dear, what did you think of A Silent Voice?
So at least you got like some kind of description based on that email. I went into this thing completely blind.
Wow.
I had no idea what we were going into. We started this movie and I was like, all right, let's go. And honestly, like I really enjoyed this movie, and you are right. This movie is a hard watch in spots, and there were times when I was like, they're not gonna go that far, are they? And there were moments where I was like, please don't, like, come on, just stay with me here. And it was definitely an interesting journey, especially into a subject matter that I'm not very familiar with, because I am not personally deaf. I've never been bullied to that extent before, or witnessed that in my circle of friends and in the school that we went to. And so it was really like an eye-opening experience to see, you know, how cruel people can be, and the fact that, like, within that group there were still people who were, like, obviously not okay with the actions being put upon this one girl, but then also the fact that they weren't willing to stand up and to be her voice, and to be her advocate as well. And it was a really poignant movie. But I do agree with Austin. I felt very episodic in points, and I would have loved to, like, really get more from all of the friends, and to really understand their stories more, because I felt like I kept losing people's names all of the time. I know that that's, you know, from a first watch, and because of the language barrier, but I was like, man, that one, and there's the blonde one, and there's the other girl, and I was like, this is so difficult to try and keep it all together. But honestly, like, I thought that the story was really beautiful, and I loved the visuals as well, of when, you know, you get our lead at the end, where he's like, all of the X's fall from the faces, and, like, that was such a relatable point, you know, just being human, you know, having those moments where you're like, I don't feel confident, and I don't want to put myself forward, so instead I'm going to shut myself off from everything to keep myself safe, and letting that go. And it was just such a beautiful moment. I was like, yes, you know, cheering, like, at the end, after all of these hard moments to get through. It was definitely like a good ending. I was like, okay, oh, I can calm my heart down now and close this chapter, because I really enjoyed this movie. It's very poignant.
Yeah. So I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And when we were watching it, you know, it did have that kind of episodic feeling, but for me, I was just kind of like, oh, this is just a slice of life movie. You know, it's just we're watching people live. I didn't think anything really kind of any more of it, because there are plenty of live action films that you can go and point to, and that's just kind of what it is. You know, you're just dealing with people living. And I really thought that it was very, very well done. It kind of had, this may sound a little bit odd, but like a little bit of like a Stand By Me kind of feeling for me when I was watching it, of, you know, people sort of pulled apart by time and circumstance and what they're going through. But then you also slowly sort of, you know, watch this group sort of reform itself as well, even if it's somewhat, you know, tenuous, if also just because teenagers and young adults are volatile people. And so it was very emotionally gripping. And then when I went in and realized and did some research and realized that it was an adaptation, I was like, oh, this does make a lot of sense now.
Which is unique for Yamada, because most of the stuff that she's done, at least in the last 10 years or so, wasn't like direct adaptations of things, especially not a manga. I think she's adapted some novels before, but that's kind of different, because you make up all the visuals kind of whole cloth when you're adapting a novel. But I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, this is like the first manga she's adapted, which is pretty interesting, I think.
Okay.
I was going to say, this may be a little bit of a side tangent. If it is, please let me know. But do you think either of you will go and read the manga now to kind of get that further characterization? Or do you think you enjoyed it enough to do that?
Yeah, I think I'm probably more interested in reading it than if this had been adapted into a TV show.
Okay.
If that makes sense. You know, I'm not sure that sitting down and like tuning in weekly for, you know, like an adaptation of this as a show. I think it works great as a movie, and I think it would work really well as a book. It's that gray area that I don't think, you know, if it were ever done, would work as well for me. What about you, dear?
I think I would want to read it because of the fact that, like, there is obviously more that you can put into a book than you can ever put onto screen, just in general. And there it goes. There's the thought. It went.
I know. Let me tell you. I know.
But no, I agree. Because also, like, this is kind of like lightning in a bottle of a film, and I think that I guess to your point that, like, I don't know if we could recreate this as well as it was here with a new version of it in like a show form. But, like, also, you know, I'm always down to watch stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that does seem to kind of be that's kind of like a perpetual I guess discourse about this movie, is that the manga fans, which this was an establishedly popular manga whenever the movie came out, but the movie just kind of exploded and made it sort of like internationally popular, is that they'll be like, oh, the movie is no good because it cuts out so much material. But I don't agree with that, because I think that while the movie feels like it could have done more, it's like one of those things where if it had done more in like a TV format, like Paul said, I don't know if it necessarily would have been better, because I think the restrictions sort of made Yamada like prioritize the most important things, which was focusing really hard on Shoya and Shoko. Like, all the other people matter, and the movie treats them like they do matter, but those are our two main characters, and I think having the primary focus put on their journey is the most important thing. So, and I think it is a success in that regard.
No, absolutely. I'm guess have you both read the manga?
I did several years ago. I unfortunately kind of ran out of time to refresh myself on it, but I do remember very much enjoying it when I read it, and everyone's comments about wanting more and getting it from that, I think, ring very true. So
I read the first 2 volumes in preparation for this podcast because I had never read them before. I'd just seen the movie, and I thought, oh, I'll just give it a try, see how it is. And I don't know if this is a pro or a con necessarily, but you guys saying that you both watched the movie basically with no prior knowledge, the manga sets up the fact that Shoya is a little crappy kid way earlier, and doesn't make his bullying feel like so, like, because in the movie it feels like Shoko shows up and he instantaneously becomes like this evil villain, you know? But in the book you see him and his friends like acting like fools and like picking on people, not as badly, but still like being like little crappy kids way earlier, so it sort of sets you up for that blow that, like, oh, this girl who is different from everyone else, he's going to single her out and pick on her. You kind of see that coming, whereas in the movie it's just kind of like, it's like he sees her and then something snaps in his brain and he just like goes total nuclear feral bully child.
No, that's fair. And I'll say this, you know, in regards to the depiction of bullying and the depiction of life, you know, as someone who hasn't seen a lot of anime in general, you know, even probably the most grounded thing that I had seen before this, Tokyo Godfathers, still had some amount of magical realism or a fantastical kind of element to some of that reality. Whereas this, you really don't get any of that. And I think that this was a really straightforward and honest sort of depiction of how unintentionally cruel children can be. You know, because they obviously know that they're, you know, he obviously knew, I think also on some level, that he was doing something wrong, but you don't really process it any further than a moment to moment kind of view of things. Something that happened a week ago happened a week ago. Or even something that happened the day before happened the day before. And you can kind of, I think, as a kid, make these little like mental leaps, where you kind of glance past certain things. And I thought that this had a really grounded, approach to it. And that's also what made it so uncomfortable, was also that it wasn't overly exaggerated, or overly melodramatic in any kind of way. It was very honest, simple, daily acts of even the most limited cruelty, but still, hurtful. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what really made it so effectively uncomfortable.
And especially because it's not just general run-of-the-mill bullying, kids picking on each other on sort of like even ground, so to speak. It's a kid specifically targeting a disabled girl, and it is only because she is different than he is that he singles her out. Like, nobody else gets treated like that except for her, and because she's different and because she's new and she's like this mysterious thing that he can't understand, both literally and figuratively. And you see some of the other kids take drastically different approaches to how to deal with this new girl who has this new thing going on with her that they've never experienced before, like the tall girl who wasn't tall as a kid being like, oh, I will volunteer to learn sign language, and the other kids in the class complain about like, why should we have to learn sign language? Shouldn't she learn how to be like us? That sort of very juvenile way of sort of expecting people who are different from you to bend to your will rather than you making sacrifices on their behalf. I was going somewhere profound with that, and then I just lost it along the way. So if somebody wants to pick up my baton, please run with it.
I was going to say that was literally the point I made to you the other day when we were watching this again. I was just like, It's so frustrating to see able-bodied people force people with different needs and accommodations forced to their comfortability, and instead of helping them with the assistance they need. And because they themselves don't want to be uncomfortable because they've never really been uncomfortable, you know what I mean? And I think it's portrayed, I was just thinking too, like it's portrayed so realistically. And I feel like when you look at like American TV shows or American movies, like specifically, it's just like, oh, your Instagram post was ugly, and that's like the extent of the bullying that they go through, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's plenty of examples that aren't that, but I just think the realness of the way of the treatment that she goes through in this movie just comes across so painful and real.
And she reacts to it in such a wide range of emotions, like throughout the movie. Like, even as a kid, like, she goes from being like, yes, I know I'm different, please stop picking on me, to, whenever she, is like on top of Shoya, like beating him and being like, I'm trying the best I can, which broke my heart, by the way, made me cry, hate that scene. I mean, love that scene, but I hate it.
Well, it's also, such a you can pull it into kind of any otherization category as well, not just the these able-bodied kids, but it's also the idea of anybody who is different in any way being otherized. It can be somebody who just doesn't speak the same language as you, or somebody who looks different than you do, all of these things that you can't change about yourself being targeted by others, and them wanting you to change yourself to fit their needs. It's something that's been going on for so long, and it even in our own American history has oh gosh, I had a word and it's gone. It has persisted, there we go, throughout generations, and it is so just frustrating to watch it happen, especially from a perspective that we don't get that often, from the bully's perspective. You know, we get a lot of these stories from the victim and how they feel about it, and the bully is just the bully, and they continue to never change throughout the story, whereas he gets to have this growth of you know, this realization of how horrible he's been to her, and trying desperately basically to not only win back, you know, that Libby is lost, but also kind of regain some respect of himself and some love for himself, because also throughout this entire journey he is experiencing a lot of self-loathing because of his actions, because of how people perceive him, because of his past. And it's a very interesting, you know, fully formed narrative of all of these people doing different paths in order to love themselves, basically, in the end.
No, yeah, very, very well said. And you know, it it has the difficult parts of humanity, but it also has some of the best parts of humanity on display as well, that pull the heart in a different direction, with you know, simple acts of apologies and forgiveness, you know, and of the love that family has for each other. And the way that sometimes the things that you think are irreparably damaged, you know, are still salvageable, you know, are still fixable. If you're just willing to put yourself out there and be empathetic and do the work to rebuild whatever it is that you think has been damaged. And so it's a very emotionally complex movie. Honestly, it was really wonderful.
And it has so many different emotional perspectives on it too, because like the journey that Shoya goes through with trying to reconcile with Shoko is like a very different dynamic than the one where like Shoko's mother has a hard time forgiving Shoya for what he did, and she never says it out loud, but she probably thinks Shoko is being very naive for allowing this boy to like get into her life again and like potentially ruin it again like he did when they were little kids. So she has a tough time reconciling with that. Likewise with Shoko's sister, her younger sister, like being very protective over her, because they come at it from we think we know what's best for you and we want to protect you, which goes against Shoko's instinct of wanting to be more forgiving. Which also sort of comes into conflict with Shoko's own sort of personal feelings of self-loathing, how she has sort of internalized a lot of these things that happen to her as her fault because she is different, quote unquote. She thinks that if only she had been, quote unquote, normal, these things wouldn't have happened, rather than people are just being mean to you for no reason. It's just that she hasn't really come to that realization yet, and it affects the way that she interacts with other people. So there's just so much complex dynamics going on here, and the dynamic with the poofy haired kid, like he meets Shoya and like puts him on this pedestal because he's like the only guy that would be nice to him. So you get to see all of these characters from so many different perspectives, except for what's her name, the long-haired, darker haired girl. She's just kind of mean. She's kind of mean.
She just
kind of sour girl.
Stays mean.
Yeah.
She was so frustrating. Even to the end, I was like, why can't you just try?
Well, and like, they give you that one little, I guess it's supposed to be that sort of like morsel of the fact that like against her better nature, she is trying, where she like signs moron at the end.
Oh yeah.
And like I guess that's meant to be her little glimmer of like, we're slowly thawing that ice heart of yours. But
like instead of Shoko getting upset, she's just like, no, you signed it wrong. It's like this. If you're gonna
insult me, do it right.
Yeah, that's what you said whenever we watched it, Tori. It's very funny. Baka.
that scene in the Ferris wheel, I was like furious.
I know.
Just push her
oh
out.
my gosh. Push her out, open that door and just
I was really
goes.
wondering about that because thinking about it this time, I didn't really think about it that much whenever we first watched it, but was like Shoko in on it? Was she like trying to spy on her? Like, why did she have her camera on? Like, what was the deal with that?
I think it was something to do with the little sister. Like, somebody had a camera somewhere. I don't know if they had. I don't know. It wasn't super clear, but it was something with the little
sister.
sister.
The camera, and she asks her to like take it for her because she goes somewhere, I think. And my assumption was that she left it on.
Yeah.
Or like that she wanted to eavesdrop and knew that like, her sister was going to be, that was sort of my reading
had no
of it.
idea that it was on.
You're probably right.
Also, I thought that, she had taken it up there specifically to like, maybe, I don't know, like use it.
Yeah.
So,
valid point as well.
That just never happened.
Yep.
But it's because, Ice Queen was there being a horrible tormentor. So
well, since we also have another movie, I'm enjoying the conversation, but I don't want to yammer too long. So if you
it's
guys
the danger of bringing me on the show. I'm sorry.
the danger of having you two together. What are you talking about?
If you guys and we'll go, I guess, in order of speakers. So Tori, if you had to rate it out of 5, what would you give?
Okay. I want to preface and say I'm a very emotional rater, and that's the scale that I operate on. I would 100% give this movie a 5, despite some of its characterization and pacing issues. It's a 5 for me. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Any answer is valid,
Yeah.
Austin, how about yourself?
I think previously, based on the first time I saw it, I would have given it like a 4, but I think it's getting closer to a 5 actually, because there's so much that I like about it that sort of eclipses any small problems I might have with it. And just over the years, I've grown to respect Yamada so much as a director, just watching I think at this point I've seen most of the things that she's done, at least the big stuff. And I just love her style. Like, she's just so good. Like, her style is so unique. It's so focused on like human emotions and trying to get those conveyed, which can be really difficult in animation. It's not an easy thing to do. You can't really rely on actors to like do it for you. You have to make it, and she's able to do that so well. So yeah, I gotta say it's closer to a 5.
All right, Dear, what about you?
Oh gosh, now I don't know. I'm gonna go a 4.5. I'm gonna give it a half point off, but overall, I think that it is like a truly fantastic, wonderful piece of art, and people should watch it. But I guess caution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Buyer beware.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I'll go 4.5 as well. Very, very impactful. Definitely something that, if you ever should choose to embark upon it, definitely be wary of it. On a certain level, I don't know what it's rated, but like I think this is something that like kids should be exposed to, if only just because of how well it handles some of the emotional complexity of it in a way that I don't think would really go over a lot of kids' heads. I don't think that it's so heady and so brainy that like it would be lost on people. And not like, small kids, but like
preteens.
Yeah, like 12-year-olds,
Preteens,
that kind of thing. Yeah. Because I think that it could be a really valuable empathy tool for people.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
That I loved was the brother-in-law, the son-in-law cameo.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
We're just like there, just out of nowhere.
Now, as far as I've read in the manga, Yeah, as far as I've read in the manga, he is also equally as mysterious in the manga too. So it's like he doesn't really get much screen time. He's just kind of like, "Hello," and then just kind of zips out.
Well, that was a great talk. Do you guys want to do your history lesson on the next director now or after we've done the clip?
Either way, sir, you're the host.
Sure.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and give y'all a clip for Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms. Quite the title. And as always, we have a clip, so take a listen.
数百年の長い命の中でイオルフの民は日々を織り続ける。弱虫。
どうして泣いてるんだい？
わからないんです。
外の世界で出会いに触れたなら誰も愛してはいけない。愛すれば本当の一人になってしまう。
一人ぼっちが一人ぼっちと出会ったか。
So that was Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms. It is directed by Mari Okada, and it stars. It's written by Mari Okada as well. It stars Manaka Iwami, Miyu Irino, Yoko Hikasa, Hiroaki Hirata, and the premise is escaping war, a young girl finds a lone surviving infant and decides to raise him as her son. Before we turn this over for the history lesson, I just would like to say that synopsis undersells a lot of what the actual plot of this movie is.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
one sentence. Here
That
it is.
that may be what the movie's about, but that's not really what the movie's about.
no, and we're missing a lot of other key context bits there.
Oh
So
yeah.
why don't you guys go ahead and before we start talking too much about the movie, why don't you tell us about Mari Okada?
Well, Tori, would you like to?
Yeah, so she actually is most well known for being a writer, a screenwriter specifically. She has done a number of famous works. I think her most well-known one besides Maquia would be Anohana, which also kind of hits a lot of the same beats that I think Maquia does. And what else do I say about her? She is probably one of, if not the most well-known woman in the industry as far as writing and creating goes. Am I? Oh, were you somebody getting a call? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry. Blame my dad.
Oh no, I think you froze.
Oh no, Tori froze.
I'm gonna blame you, Austin.
My dad called so hard it froze you, Tori.
Yeah, I just got my internet connection's unstable. Thanks.
Oh, oops. Sorry, hold on. I think he's okay. He's just probably calling me if I want dinner, but I don't eat. Not during a podcast. Anyway, please continue. I'm sorry.
Do you want to pick up where I left off? Because
well, if you kind of wanted
I've lost it.
if you wanted to sort of finish your thought, and I can pick up afterwards.
Oh yeah, I like I said, I think she is probably the most well-known name when it comes to women creating in the anime industry, and I have a bone to pick with her because everything that I watch of hers ends up making me sob like a little baby. So quite the woman.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. Her career in a nutshell, for sure. I mean, she's extremely prolific. Like she has written the screenplay for a ton of different really popular things, in addition to some of her more original work. Like I think she wrote the script for Black Butler, which was really popular back in the day. She wrote the script for some Fate Stay Night adaptations. Um, and she's just a huge workhorse. Like her screenplay writing in adaptive work, just pages and pages of work. But then a lot, like in the last like decade or so, she's really been focusing on more original properties. Like Anthem of the Heart, Anohana, which has an equally long name as Maquia. What is it? Anohana, The Flower We Saw That Day, or something like that.
Yeah, something
And
off the wall.
then there's she likes really long titles, which I respect. But yeah, Maquia is her directorial debut, actually. The first time she's really been in the director's chair, but she has like 20 plus years of experience being a screenplay writer, and like Tori said, is probably out of the women screenplay writers in anime working today, she's probably the most recognizable by name.
Okay, interesting. Would you guys like to start us off again, or would you like us to kick off on this one?
You guys kick it off. I'm very
go
curious
for
what
it.
you guys think of this film. So
Okay.
please let us know. Give us your hot take.
Dear, would you like to, or would you like me to?
Sure, I can go. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I always really enjoy anime because they can, you know, like Tori said earlier, they can do so many things that live action can't do. They can, and they're so creative when it comes to just the idea of what a story can be. And I loved all of the like medieval magical creatures and the like the land of basically the elves from Rivendell that live in the sky, and they communicate with stories that they weave, and it was just like so beautiful and interesting. And this journey that she takes with this boy, which she basically can, like, you know, live forever at a certain extent. You know, she has such a long life compared to humans, and like the reality of raising a human child and like watching him grow as she doesn't age at all. And it was such a heartbreaking but a beautiful story, and like her journey of figuring out what it means to be a mother through all of this. And it just, yeah, that sentence just completely undersold this movie.
Yes.
Conveniently left out the immortality bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Changes the whole dynamic.
The journey of like her friends that get, you know, they all get displaced from their homeland, and there are different paths that they take, and the one who ends up being princess but like also a captive at the same time, and like her descent into madness. And it's so interesting. I was like, this is like Game of Thrones but anime. I was like, this is great. I really enjoyed the ride of this movie a lot. I also just loved the visuals. I thought that the whole aesthetic was really just like pleasing to the eye. This kind of like softness to the background world, as like everything had like a very distinct and clear cultural identity as well. And I just really enjoyed like fully immersing myself in this story. It was great. You?
So I think I feel like I remember that I picked this one because it was specifically, you know, mentioned in the email that you sent that it was her directorial debut, and so I was like, all right, you know, let's go for it. And again, I didn't look at anything about it. You, I think, mentioned when I told you what we were doing, prefaced that it was going to be like both films are going to be very emotional. And after the first one, we watched them Monday night and Tuesday night. Is that right?
Yes.
So after the first one, I was like, okay, they're both going to be emotional. The last one was like this slice of life, sort of, you know, very grounded, very real story. This next one is going to be probably something kind of like that. And so when we kicked off and it was immediately this magical world and all of this fantastical element, I was like, well, we just did a full about face, you know, sort of in just sort of the world overall. But I thought that they both ended up having, you know, the thing that really struck me as we were going through it, is that it was so profoundly personal and very, very bittersweet. And on a certain level, I found this kind of weird thematic connectivity between both of them, in the sense that so much of them are about, you know, just at their core, the human condition, you know, what it is to be alive, what it is to live with other people, to interact with other people, and how relationships change over time. And it was the other one, you know, hit me on an emotional level in one particular way, but this one really left me very melancholic, you know, on a certain level at the end. The other one has some of that sort of move toward positive growth at the end of it. And this one, you know, she finds, not to get into what the ending is, but she finds solace in what the ending of the movie is. But it's a tough pill, you know, like it's that very hard truth about reality, which is that things end. And it's pretty devastating.
Yeah.
What did y'all think of it?
Tori?
Oh, sure. Weirdly enough, this is a comfort movie for me.
I think I could get that. I think I could understand that.
But as far as speaking about it, gosh, where do I start? Like everything, kind of like you both said, when I first went into this, because Austin and I saw it together in the theater as well when it first came out, what the poster gave me versus what I got in the film was just two completely different things. And you know,
I'm pretty sure we went into it blind as well.
Yeah,
like,
we didn't know anything about it either.
I think I knew it was a Mari Okada thing.
Yeah.
So I prepared myself for there to be lots of scenes of loud sobbing. She likes to do that. Big tears. She loves that. But other than that, you're right. We didn't really know too much.
Right. And I can remember sitting in the theater and being so proud of myself. Because like I said, you know, most everything I've seen of hers has just gotten this really big emotional reaction out of me. Didn't cry. Everything was fine. Loving it. And then the ending happened and it was just like downpour on my face. It was so bad. But I know I spoke, you know, about interpersonal relationships and dynamics, but I think the way that Mari Okada does it is so strong and so different than what Naoko Yamada does. And seeing everything play out in this movie, and like the traveling, Eeyore Guy said, you know, a child taking on a child, that's a very scary thing. And I'm well into my adult years and I couldn't imagine having the responsibility of taking care of a child like that, especially when all this war is going on and things like that. And I'm thankful that there are a few comedy scenes, because everything else just hits so heavily that it's nice to be able to laugh, like in the barn where she's trying to feed the baby milk and she's like, I don't understand how this works. And
emotional response. You're like,
I know, she's just like so stressed out and tired and probably hungry, and just everything that she's just crying because she's so confused. And I'm like, oh, come here, you babies, come here. But gorgeous emotional movie, and it definitely makes you come to terms with some things that you might not be ready to come to terms with in life. So
yeah, that particular barn scene with the goat and the baby is the one that because I have a panel that I do at conventions called 10 anime movies you may have missed, and I guess just generally speaking about the popularity of this movie within the anime sphere overall, it's kind of a hidden gem. Like, not a lot of people know about this one. I just think it's kind of slipped through the cracks. Maybe it's not a huge crowd pleaser. Maybe it's too sad for people. I don't know, but it hasn't really hit like the mainstream, even though it's, pretty popular. But anyway, I use that goat clip as part of my panel whenever I talk about this movie, and it always gets a good laugh because one, it's really cute and really funny, and two, I mean, it's kind of indicative of the film overall. It's like this girl who has no idea what she's doing, who's in this like very difficult, like personal context of where she knows because of her, I guess her fantasy biological condition of not being able to die or is effectively immortal, and the fact that like her culture has taught her not to get attached to anything other than her people because she's always going to end up being alone if she does, just trying to navigate this world that she's never really experienced before, and doing it in a very traumatic way. She didn't just like decide to leave her town like Bilbo Baggins style off on a big adventure. It's like she was forced out through war, like a very traumatic event where she basically survived a genocide, and then she has to take care of this baby. So it is a very I guess it's like a broadly intense movie because it's got all these things brewing in the background, but a different kind of intensity from a silent voice, whereas that's like very, very personal, very up close. Whereas this movie is a little bit more abstracted, but it still does have a lot of those like personal, like big emotional pulls, I think, especially with the relationship between her and her son and how that evolves over time.
No, absolutely. And, with when we were watching it, and it's this regularly people talk about how there have been fewer and fewer mythical and magical things in the world, and that like the last sort of remnants of magic are dying out. And on a certain level, that almost, I think, reads into the character's own journey of of understanding the world and of growing up, because when you are a legitimate child, things do seem so much more sort of big and spectacular and have that sort of magical quality to you, and you believe in certain things that as you get older you realize aren't true, and the world itself becomes less magical. And so that undercurrent throughout it also felt very tied to her own narrative as you were going through it. And it also made me think of, Lord of the Rings, where you're at like the end of the third age, and magic is kind of leaving the world, and it's this sort of weird spot, of being left with reality for whatever reality is,
Mm-hmm.
that is always not always a very comforting thing either.
Mm-hmm. And I do think it is really interesting that they wanted to go, or that Mari Okada wanted to go with this sort of big fantasy epic sort of story, it's big fantasy epic in like trappings and context, but it's a deeply personal story. Really ties in with kind of all of the creative freedom that she was given on this project. Because basically her supervisors at PA Works were like, we want you to do and she said this multiple times, and this is how they contextualized it, a 100% Mari Okada movie. So she basically makes her own JRPG world and then tells a story about motherhood, not about slaying dragons, or not about, finding the magical crystals and summoning the great tree. I'm actually doing that in Dragon Quest XI right now. But makes it a deeply personal story about motherhood, which I think is really really brilliant. And I guess fun fact, because he doesn't really work a lot in animated works, the character designer for this is the same guy that designs most of the characters for Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, and he's also worked on like the Nier franchise and Final Fantasy Tactics. So I think it's pulling on Mari Okada being a big video game nerd as well, because she definitely was. She was kind of a a loner child and played a lot of video games. So lots of different elements of herself going on here, which I really appreciate. I think there's always something to be had whenever any creator puts a lot of themselves into a film, because that's when you know it's like a really genuine expression of the kind of art and the kind of story they want to tell.
I think that the story also is kind of like that old adage of the, you know, if you love something, you have to let it go. You know, because it's mirrored not only with her journey with her child, but also the whole the magic is leaving and things are dying and we can't keep it, and the king's idea of keeping all of these dragons in cages to try and hold on to it as tightly as possible, but that ends up, you know, being a detrimental thing because they just keep dying off because of their, you know, their will to live is fading because of the fact that they don't have the freedom. So like the very thing like he wants to keep because of it's a symbol of power, he's actually killing it as the story goes on. And it's also,
and with the Eorf as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is kind of this whole like you have to let things go, you have to let things be themselves, and you know, if you love something you have to set it free, or else it'll never truly be able to reach its fullest potential and be the thing that you love again if you smother it. And I think that that's just a really beautiful story, because also at a certain point, like in her son's life, she does just let him live. You know, she goes off and she does her own journey, and he gets to, like, you know, have the rest of his tale basically to figure out his own path without having, you know, her constantly, you know, being there. And then that's also our journey in life as well, because like we can't stay under our parents' wing for our whole life. We have to go out and experience the world for ourselves and figure out who we are without them, you know, take the lessons that they've given us and you know, step forward on our own two feet. And so it is just kind of this beautiful tale of like even at that point, you know, she was ready to let go, but he wasn't. And it's just, you know, this constant, you know, back and forth of this just beautiful journey. And I really enjoyed this movie a lot. It is so sad, but I think that it earns that sadness in spades, because it's also very cathartic in that, you know, because we've all experienced, you know, loss of some degree, you know, that was truly hard. And I think that this movie has this kind of like nice coming around of that emotion, and like understanding that like you can be sad but happy at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
And you are right, she does do a lot of like hard crying.
Big time. You could just do like a Mari, I'm sure someone's probably done it on YouTube, but like a Mari Okada anime cry compilation. She does it a lot. It's like one of her big things, which I respect.
And it's like the character's like whole thing for like a while of her just being like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry, because that is like my just weeping. My response to anything. It's just I think I'll cry about it a little bit.
And I was just thinking as everyone was talking, like if you wanted to do like a deep dive research analysis on this, you could do like a comparison between like all the different dynamics of parenthood and how that's portrayed in this, because you see like the dynamic between, I guess, of course, Maquia and Ariel. Then you also see the dynamics between the mother that she meets in the town that helps her out and like her two kids. And then also you could contrast that against the relationship between the king and the prince. So there's like so many different like parenthood dynamics going on here that are really interesting and all different. It's like they're not all the same. So it's just a lot to chew on.
No, yeah. And also, you know, going into when Ariel then becomes a parent in this moment of, you know, him talking to Data and being like, you know, we have to teach our child to love as we were taught to love. And you know, it's a cycle, it's a continuous thing of
and she's like, I'm sorry I picked on you for saying you liked your mom.
No, yeah, it's such a sweet moment too. And like after she like helps her give birth to and in the middle of the war.
Just pieces out.
In the
like,
middle of the war.
Oh my gosh, guys. Deus Ex Machina.
That's right.
Hey. I'm out. See ya.
When like they, you know, had like when they met up to start dinner, and then the siege started, and he ran off, I literally like leaned over to Lauren and I was like, I swear to God, if she goes into labor during this battle. And I was like, well,
yeah. I mean, stress induces labor, so I mean.
True. Oh my gosh.
What is the next logical beat in this story is, well, I have a pregnant person, so she's gonna get
It's time. Drama time.
Yeah, happy birthday.
That's right. But it's almost like weird the idea like of how she found Ariel as a baby, you know, in his mother's arms, who had been, you know, slaughtered by bandits. And so it's kind of this whole like the same but different, you know, time repeats itself, but this time we get a better outcome, you know. It's
and
such an interesting movie.
Yeah, and that talk about different outcomes. It's like, well, we begin the story with you know, the invasion of the Eorf people, and it sort of, and we see like their like post-genocide and their like resistance and their captivity, et cetera, and then it ends with like ostensibly like the end of the war, I guess, maybe. So it's like there's all these cycles, but the arc bent towards peace, I guess, which is, I guess, a kind of a hopeful message.
And it honestly kind of goes right back to kind of where we started, almost, in a sense of like, we started on that farm and then we get to end on that farm, but this time it's not during wartime, it's like during actually like a time of peace and prosperity. And it's just like, it's really interesting.
Well, and you know, she had the flight that took her away on her journey that was not her choosing, that was this accident, you know, of this dragon that was in one of the like fits of rage or what have you. And then conversely, when she leaves, she's in control of one and she's actively choosing to fly away. And so again, it's this sort of, you know, mirrored elements of the narrative at large, and this repetitious cycle of it. Also, I was going to say, you know, when we were watching A Silent Voice, one of my first thoughts as we were watching it was like, oh, you know, this is just a slice of life thing. It's not like some big expansive thing. And then when I was watching this, again, I didn't have any background information, anything like that. I was like, this has to be based on something.
Oops.
Yeah.
No, you had it a little backwards, honestly.
Yeah.
Where I was like, no, this feels like it could be longer. I was like, no, this is perfect though. I don't need anything else. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a reasonable assumption because it feels like there's this grand world. You feel like it's like a story happening like inside of a much bigger work. Like I mentioned JRPGs. I mean, it literally just feels like a JRPG world that this small little story is happening in, which I think is really difficult to pull off, like big fantasy scale in like a short, like one-off movie. Like I'm trying to think of anything that I know of that's like short form that really sells me on a fantasy world. I can't think of anything.
I read a book recently, and I won't delve too much into it, but it kind of was the same thing where it's like one little story. It's called The Empress of Salt and Fortune, I believe, by Niveau. And it basically is a little small story and like a big overarching type thing, and it was very, very good.
Okay, cool.
I think that really goes back to having like a fully formed idea. And, you know, getting to see all aspects of that idea, but at the end of the day, like she set the rules of this world so precisely and stuck with them and got to explore it in such an interesting way that like it does feel so much bigger. Whereas like, you know, I've seen so many movies where I'm like, you've broken the rules of your film so many times over that I don't even know what I'm supposed to take away from this anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't fully immerse myself in it because you don't remember basic things about your own world anymore, you know. Mm-hmm. I just really enjoyed it, but that's also I think because of the fact that like she got to write it and direct it, and that it is mm-hmm. truly like a fully formed thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No, absolutely. Dear, if you had to rate Maquia, what would you give it?
I'm giving this movie a 5. I really loved it. Again, I just every part of this was like just I couldn't look away. I was ready for the next moment. I was in this for the end, and like when the end got there, it struck me like right in the heart. Like after we finished this movie, I was like, I'm fine. Okay. It's such a beautiful story about motherhood. You know, and I really loved this movie a lot.
No, yeah. I think I'll give it a 5 as well. Honestly, I think that both of these are movies that I will go back to. I think that they were both very, very well done. You know, I won't go back to A Silent Voice probably as often. But I think that these were both really fantastic films. You know, there's and in particular with Maquia, there's, you know, a storytelling term that everyone tells you especially when you're trying to do something very big, which is big canvas, small story. You know, use as much as you want, make it as big as you want, but make sure that it's personal and grounded. And I think that that's definitely what this managed to achieve. You know, it wasn't about the Who's-a-Doodles and the Gormagons. You know, it's about people. You know, it's about relationships and dynamics, and I think that that's definitely what really sells it in the day. And it's also, again, it's very stunning. It's a very different art style than A Silent Voice, but I liked this sort of softness to it. And it also still had these very big, bright, vibrant colors, and I thought that it was really enjoyable. What about you two?
I was afraid you wouldn't like the art style because like nobody has a nose. Like I know
unless they're in profile.
Unless they're in profile.
Unless they're that one military captain.
Yes.
Who was like the only one who has.
Yeah.
That from the beginning where she like holds the baby, and I was like, this baby doesn't have a nose.
Yeah. Just blends in.
Yeah. But yeah, what would y'all give it?
No hesitation. It's a 5-star movie for me. It's nearly perfect in every way, and I definitely agree. Had it been a fantasy story about political war and dragons, I don't think I would have enjoyed it nearly as much. But doing something about the power of motherhood and loss and things like that in that fantasy setting, just so good.
Mm-hmm. I remember Tori and I did a podcast as soon as we watched it in theaters like 2 or 3 years ago, and I remember having a problem with this movie, but I don't remember what that problem was, so I guess I don't have that problem anymore.
There you go.
So I guess that's a good sign. I guess I gotta agree with you guys. I mean, I think it's a 5-star movie. Like, it really is quite good, and if you are a type of person to enjoy really emotional experiences or resonate with like deeply personal stories like this, I think there's a lot to like here, and it makes me really excited for whatever Mari Okada decides to make next. I mean, it seems like this movie was really successful for her, so I hope she gets to sit in the director's chair some more often. And make some other really cool and undoubtedly very emotionally charged content. So I'm really excited. So I mean, I guess Paul, from your perspective, like how was this for a directorial debut?
You know, director debuts are so interesting, I think, because so often they're that filmmaker kind of at their most raw. And so, like, you go back and you look at something, you know, for a sort of very different example, you look at something like Clerks. And Kevin Smith has never really made another movie quite like Clerks. You know, you go back and you can see all of the sort of Kevin Smith isms, but he's never really made something quite like Clerks since then. Same with Tarantino with like Reservoir Dogs. It's all there, but it's this rougher, sort of less polished, but absolutely them piece of work and piece of art. And so I think that if this is, you know, her sort of big debut and her, and knowing that she has also written before, I think it's a really, really strong debut. I definitely welcome seeing more of her work. I could definitely also see how she could get better from here. You know, I think that sounds weird after we all gave it like a 5. But I think that there are absolutely ways that you could see that she could, you know, continue to grow and continue to elevate on what she already has done so incredibly well. And this was a hell of a first outing, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's pretty much all that we have in terms of the main review and discussion. We'll wrap up with our usual sort of end of the show bit. First, I would like to make an announcement for our listeners. If you don't follow us on social media, I teased this on last week's episode because I found out last week. I am now an official member of the North Carolina Film Critics Association.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm very pumped. Thank you. It was, you know, one thing that I've been wanting to do, if you've been listening to the show for a while, has been sort of not stop doing what we do, but also include, you know, newer content and getting those sort of advanced screening opportunities and things like that, so that we can get a little bit ahead of the 8 ball and not be so beholden specifically to the past, even though I absolutely love the past. And I love sharing film history with everyone. But it's a really good positive first step. I'm very excited. I'm excited to be, you know, a part of this network and to meet new people and potentially have new people on the show. And also a big shout out for why I got in definitely goes out to friend of the show, Nick Delgadillo, who wrote me an absolutely lovely letter of recommendation. I was kind of in like a weird headspace the day that I sat down to do my application, and I read his letter of recommendation for me, and it nearly made me cry. And so it was absolutely lovely, and big thanks to Nick for that. Beyond
imposter syndrome can be a heck of a thing, and sometimes you need somebody else's perspective to snap you out of it a bit.
No, that's absolutely fair. And that definitely did that. It was very sweet, and I absolutely owe him big for every lovely thing that he said about me. He's a very smart guy, and he's a great writer. So if you haven't gone and checked out any of Nick's work, you only know him from the show. Definitely go and read what he has on his website and all of that. Beyond that, I guess we'll talk about what we've been watching. I'll let you guys kick that off. So what are some stuff that y'all have been watching, reading, playing?
Ooh, you go first, Tori.
Oh no. I feel like my brain just always exits whenever somebody asks me this question. Watching, I started a few nights ago this new film. It's a Hulu exclusive with Sebastian Stan in it, and it is touted as like a dark comedy horror film. I believe it's called Fresh. Very intrigued by where that's going, so I'm excited to finish that up. Reading, just started a book called The Inheritance Games, which is kind of like Knives Out meets Ready or Not. A lot of fun with that one. And catching up on Disenchantment, the newest season of Disenchantment. So that's kind of where I'm living right now.
Doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
For me, most of my media lately has been video game related. You know, at the recording of this podcast, Elden Ring came out like last week. But I made a vow to myself that I had to beat at least Dark Souls 3 or Sekiro before I bought Elden Ring. So I'm actually playing through both of them. We'll see which one I get through the quickest. I'm a really big I'm a really big Bloodborne fan. That's like my second favorite video game of all time. So, you know, and Sekiro and Dark Souls are a bit different, but still enjoyable. So I've been putting a lot of hours into that, in addition to a few other things. But what I've been watching recently, a friend of mine turned me on to some Adult Swim programming that I had missed over the years. Specifically a show called Joe Pera Talks with You. And it is basically these short 11-minute episodes of this very mild-mannered, upper Midwest choir teacher who in every episode just talks to you about things. And it is very interesting and very quiet but very funny situations. Not your typical like bombastic, gross out, weird stuff that you get from Adult Swim, which, don't get me wrong, I like that stuff too. But Joe Pera is very downplayed and very, very funny because of that. Really unique show. I watched like maybe a season and a half in like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. They're really short episodes, but it's just like once you start watching it, you kind of can't stop. And in that regard too, also speaking of Adult Swim, I've gone back and watched Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which is just a ridiculous show that I love so much. It's so dumb. I like it quite a bit.
Okay. Well, on our end, I mean, not terribly much. We've watched some Jeopardy.
Yes.
Hey, nice.
Consistent thing that we've been watching, honestly.
Yeah. Because I'm at home and Lauren has to go to the office whenever I'm home alone and working, I'm usually also, I put something on in the background typically. And so like yesterday I watched 89 Batman. Today I watched Batman Returns.
Which one's better, Paul?
Okay, so I ultimately give both of them a 5.
Excellent.
All right.
But I think that I think technically I gave Batman a 4.5 on Letterboxd, but that's neither here nor there. I think they're both great. I think the thing that brings down the first one just a hair is that it is a little bit more tame, and also I'm not sure that Kim Basinger is as into it as everyone else is. And then with Batman Returns, though, it's so much more dialed up. You know, everything about it is sort of turned that little bit up. The camp is more turned up. It's spinning like 3 different villain plates. You know, you've got like Oswald Cobblepot, Max Schreck, and Selena Kyle, like all happening at the same time. And it just kind of lets Batman be Batman. You know, like it doesn't try and dig too deep into Bruce's psyche any further. It's like, all right, we've established him.
Yeah.
He is Batman.
Yeah. Batman, go.
And I think that it's really, I think the design of it's even better. And I ultimately think that, I think they're both absolutely fantastic. I think that I do ever so slightly prefer Returns. So the only other thing that we've been watching lately, though, is we did go out to theaters last night with my parents, and we saw The Batman, the new Matt Reeves film. Have y'all seen that one yet?
Tomorrow.
Okay. I won't say anything further.
Yes.
Dang it, we should have done this tomorrow. Well, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's but I want to, pick your brains about it.
Yeah. Be sure to let us know what y'all think.
Will do.
I will say that I really enjoyed it, but I think Matt Reeves is pretty unparalleled as a director. I don't know that he's ever really had, for me, as a director, a miss. Even if I don't think War of the Planet of the Apes is as good as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I still think that War of the Planet of the Apes is absolutely fantastic.
That's the third one, right?
Incredible. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
With Woody Harrelson, where they all go mute.
Yeah.
So I think that he's absolutely tremendous. And I wasn't disappointed by his take on Batman at all, and that's all that I'll say on that, so that y'all don't get ruined on that.
Good. Yeah.
This is my favorite Zoe Kravitz performance that I've ever seen. So I think that she really she didn't go outside of her usual type, but I think that it's just it's just really good. I think she does a phenomenal job. Honestly, there's a point where I forgot that it's Zoe Kravitz. So I think that really says something.
No, yeah, that's a good bit of praise.
Does the mask work better in the movie than it works in the promos? Because I gotta say, I'm not a fan of
mask?
it. Yeah, her mask, or the cut up ski mask thing. I don't know. I don't know if I dig that.
There's an argument to be made that she hasn't officially become full-blown Catwoman yet, and I think that for the most part it works in the context of the movie.
Okay.
And honestly, she wears it when she's in the act of doing things, but for the most part, she doesn't wear it, and so
yeah, you don't see it often.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's
I
fair.
don't think it gets too distracting.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
She gets a lot of fun wigs.
Ooh.
Wigs are fun.
I actually just did a list on Twitter today of the worst film wigs.
I gotta go check that out. Oh goodness.
That has a horrible wig.
That's pretty much all that we have for y'all. Would y'all like to shamelessly plug yourselves, where people can listen to your content, what you have coming out, Twitter handles, anything?
Sure. I guess for me, you can follow me over on Twitter. I'm at BebopShock. You can find the Third Impact Anime podcast, where we talk about anime at least once a month. We need to put out more episodes. We need to get a little bit more organized, like Paul and Lauren are. But our most recent episode was on the 2017 series Girls Last Tour, with another special guest, a friend of ours, a panelist in the community. We had a really great discussion about that show. You can find our Twitter at TI_anime. We also have a website, thirdimpactanime.com.
I am over on Twitter as well. You can follow me at Worst Waifu, and I basically just talk about whatever's going on in my life during the day. So nothing too exciting.
I like the handle.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was so shocked that wasn't taken. I was like,
me too.
Yes, score.
I will say, you mentioned Letterboxd, so I guess we both of us are on Letterboxd too. So mine's at BebopShock as well. So
mine is at Ghost Story, STORI. Different handle. Okay. So
I'll definitely have to add you. I think that I've got Austin added, so I'll also go and look you up. So well, that's pretty much all that we have. You can always follow the Film Buds on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll link everything down below as well. We're, I think, at Film Buds on Twitter, at the Film Buds podcast on Instagram, and of course thefilmbuds.com. If you haven't already, also make sure that you go and read on our website Madeline's sort of inaugural comments that she wrote for our Women in Film Month. It's called the women on screen, the woman in the mirror, and it's sort of this informal, personal piece of writing about, you know, looking for yourself on screen as a woman. And so it's a really fun. It's not a very long read, but it's a really lovely read, and we also definitely thank her for contributing that. And you can also go and read my review for The Seed, which is a new movie that just came out like today on Shudder.
Oh, it did.
Yeah,
and so,
today. If you want to go and read my review on that,
is it about agriculture?
No, it's a different kind of seed.
Yeah, it's kind of invasion story. It's an alien invasion sort of where these three women who are hanging out in the desert find this like alien that has crash landed, and it has malevolent intent. And it's a little bit funny, a little bit campy, not overly funny. I liked it for the most part. Not perfect, but a really good little romp, and like not a bad way to spend an hour and some change. But yeah, so that's all that we have for y'all. Austin, Tori, thank you so much for coming on. Tori, we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah.
Oh man, if y'all want to talk some horror movies, let me know. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you guys as always for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.